Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
There was an Amazon store in downtown Chicago, sleek and modern, filled with the latest in cashierless technology. Just grab your items, walk out, and get charged automatically. For most customers, it was a marvel. But for Marcus, a night shift employee, it became something else entirely. Marcus had been working there for 6 weeks, mostly stocking shelves after hours. The store was supposed to be empty from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., giving him a quiet window to work. He loved the silence, the soft whir of cooling fans, the hum of fluorescent lights. But one Tuesday night, something changed. He was scanning a shelf of smart thermostats when he noticed on his handheld inventory device that one item had been marked checked out. Confused, he checked the timestamp. It had been scanned by the store's system not 5 minutes ago. But Marcus was alone. The doors had locked behind him as always, confirmed by his security badge. No one could have entered or exited. He walked the aisles, half annoyed, half intrigued, calling out, "Hello? Store's closed. If someone's in here, you need to leave." No answer, just the hollow feedback of his voice echoing off glass displays. He checked the cameras from his tablet. Nothing. Every aisle was clear. Still, he couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, then they went out entirely. The emergency backup kicked in, casting a dim red glow across the aisles. It was eerie. The store's sleek black surfaces now looked like the inside of a coffin. His tablet still worked, so he opened the system diagnostics. That's when he saw it. The store had registered 5 people inside, but only his badge had been used. The system even listed the phantom visitors as registered shoppers. No names, just timestamps. He called his manager, straight to voicemail, then corporate security. No answer, just static. That's when he heard the sound. Soft footsteps, not sneakers or heels, but bare feet, slapping faintly against the polished floor. Marcus froze. He wasn't imagining this. The sound moved from aisle 4 to 5, then 6, toward him. He ducked behind a promotional display of Echo Dots, clutching the metal shelving to steady himself. A chill wrapped around him like the air conditioning had cranked into overdrive. He dared to peek. No one. But the store's inventory system blinked again. Now there were 7 people inside. Something wasn't just wrong with the store's sensors, it was the store itself. The Alexa devices began whispering, one by one. He couldn't make out the words at first, but then they grew louder. "He sees you." He bolted for the back room. Every device he passed turned on without prompting, spouting weather updates, recipe tips, and random trivia in warped, glitched voices. One of the Fire TVs turned on and played a security feed of Marcus, sleeping, at home, in bed, wearing the same clothes he had on now. He ran harder, got to the emergency door, swiped his badge, denied. Tried the exit by the loading dock, denied. Every exit was locked, every override failed. Then he heard his own voice from the intercom. "Marcus, please return to aisle 7. There's a customer waiting." Terrified, he did the only thing he could think of. He shut the main power breakers. The lights went black. Silence returned, until the emergency lights flared back on, brighter than before. Aisle 7 now glowed with blue LED strips that hadn't existed before, and standing in the middle of the aisle was a figure, human-shaped, but tall, too tall, limbs too long, no face, just a smooth reflection like a mannequin dipped in ink. It pointed at him. Marcus ran. He didn't remember how he got out. He only remembers the cold on his face when he collapsed outside the loading dock, the sunrise breaking over the skyline. The store was closed indefinitely after that. Corporate claimed it was a systems glitch, but Marcus quit the next day. He tried to move on, but every now and then, his smart devices at home light up on their own, whispering his name. And aisle 7? It no longer exists in any Amazon store blueprint, but customers occasionally report seeing it, just for a second, before it disappears again. And if they go in, they don't always come back out.
Story number 2.
There was a small, neighborhood Amazon store in a quiet suburban town. The kind of place where you could grab a snack, pick up a new phone charger, and even buy a book, all without speaking to a single person. It was convenient, modern, and incredibly popular. But there was something off about it, something that only a few people noticed. Kara, a high school senior, had just moved to the town with her family. She didn't know anyone yet, so one late night, she decided to explore the store. It was around 11:30 p.m. when she arrived. She was just picking up a few things for school. The doors were automatic, just like they always were. The store was quiet, almost too quiet. She noticed the absence of music, the absence of that usual bustling energy that most stores had. The only sound was the soft beep of items being scanned as she walked through the aisles. As she grabbed a pack of gum, her eyes caught the reflection of someone in the corner of the store. It wasn't the figure of a person, though. It looked like a distortion in the air, almost like a black smoke that hung in one corner of the aisle, just out of reach. Kara paused. She tried to look away, chalking it up to tired eyes, but when she looked back, it was still there, swirling faintly. Shrugging it off, she continued walking. But as she turned down one of the aisles, the overhead lights flickered once, then twice. The buzzing sound grew louder, the fluorescent lights almost stuttering in rhythm with her heartbeat. And then, as she reached out to grab a bottle of water, she felt something tug at the hem of her jacket, pulling gently. Kara whipped around, but no one was there. She stared, her breath catching in her throat, eyes scanning the aisle. Nothing. But the sensation didn't go away. It followed her. Her heart began racing, but she needed to get her items and leave. She moved down the aisle, her hands skimming the shelves, trying to ignore the feeling that something was wrong. The hum of the store seemed to grow louder, more oppressive. And then the store's intercom system crackled to life. Is someone there? The voice was distorted, robotic, and it wasn't the usual store assistant voice. It sounded different, more hollow. And then, after a long pause, the voice whispered again, but this time it was directly in her ear. Kara, we see you. Terrified, she backed up, stumbling into another aisle, looking around for the source of the voice. She pressed herself into the shelf of books, the air feeling colder by the second. Kara, the voice whispered again, and this time it was followed by a sound that made her blood run cold, the sound of footsteps. She turned quickly, her breath coming in shallow gasps. A man in a dark hoodie stood at the other end of the aisle. His face was hidden in shadows, but there was something unmistakably wrong about the way he stood, the way he didn't move. He just stared. Kara, the voice said, but this time it wasn't coming from the intercom. It was coming from the man. Panic surged through her and she bolted toward the door. The exit was only a few feet away, but the door wouldn't open. She tried to swipe her phone to unlock it, but the screen remained black. The man was still there, now at the entrance, blocking her escape. And then, just as she thought she couldn't take it anymore, everything stopped. The lights flickered one last time, and when they came back on, the store looked completely different. The aisles were twisted and strange. Shelves that had once been filled with merchandise were now bare, the walls covered with messages written in some dark, flowing substance. Kara's reflection in the glass door wasn't hers. It was a pale, twisted version of herself, a hollow-eyed girl who seemed to be grinning. Kara didn't know how she escaped. She doesn't remember how she left the store that night or how she ended up on the street outside. She only remembers the eerie calm that washed over her as she stood in the street, staring at the empty store. It was as if nothing had happened, as if everything was normal. But it wasn't. She knew that. She stopped visiting the store after that. But sometimes when she walks by, she still hears the whispers. Sometimes she can almost feel them watching.
Story number 3.
In a small coastal town, nestled between cliffs and the sea, there was an Amazon Go store that was popular among both locals and tourists. It was a brand new store, sleek and shiny, with high-tech sensors and the promise of a completely seamless shopping experience. But there was something strange about this particular location. Something no one really talked about openly, though every local seemed to know. Kenny, a college student who had just moved to the town for a summer internship, wasn't one to believe in superstitions. He thought it was all nonsense until he had his first late-night trip to the store. It was around 1 a.m., and Kenny had forgotten to grab a charger for his phone, which was now dying fast. He figured he'd run to the Amazon Go store for a quick fix. The streets were eerily quiet, and the ocean's waves crashing against the rocks were the only sounds filling the air as he approached the glass doors. As he entered, a chill ran down his spine. The store was empty. Not a single soul was around, despite the usual bustle during the day. The shelves, normally stocked with gadgets and snacks, looked different. The lighting was dimmer than usual, casting long shadows along the walls. He chalked it up to the hour, but it still felt wrong. The instant he grabbed a charger, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, surprised to see a new notification. "Kenny, the aisle is waiting." He frowned, not remembering signing up for any messages like that. Confused, he typed back a quick reply, "What aisle?" But when he hit send, the notification vanished. He glanced around. Something was moving in the corner of his eye. He turned sharply toward the back of the store, but there was no one there. The shelves were still empty, but he could have sworn he saw someone. A shadow flicker, like a figure just out of view. He felt his stomach tighten. The air in the store was thicker, like the humidity was rising rapidly. Suddenly, a noise came from the speakers. Not the usual soft music, but a static hum followed by distorted voices. He couldn't make out what was being said, but it sounded like whispers, soft, slow whispers. The voice on the intercom spoke next, almost directly to him. "Kenny, don't leave." Chilled, he turned to the door, only to find that it wouldn't open. He swiped his phone at the scanner, but it failed. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the store into darkness. Kenny's heart raced. He quickly pulled out his flashlight, shining it around the aisles, looking for an exit. But then the voices returned, louder this time, coming from every direction. "It's too late now, Kenny," they whispered, one voice overlapping another, growing in volume. He turned toward the sound of the voice and saw a figure standing at the end of the aisle. It was a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned, faded white dress. Her hair hung in front of her face, obscuring her features, but her presence was suffocating, like a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. She didn't move, she didn't speak. Then the store's overhead lights flickered back on, revealing the shelves once more. But something was wrong. The shelves were filled with items that hadn't been there before. Old, rusty-looking objects that seemed out of place, like antiques. There was an old clock that read 12 and a dusty book with no title. Kenny looked at the woman, his pulse racing. She hadn't moved, but somehow he felt her eyes on him. In a panic, he sprinted toward the exit again, this time using the emergency exit. He didn't care if the alarm went off. He just needed to get out. The door swung open with a heavy creak, and he stumbled outside, gasping for air. He turned back toward the store. It looked normal again, bright, inviting, with the usual Amazon Go logo shining in the night. The woman was gone. The strange antique items were nowhere to be seen. But as he stood there, catching his breath, he noticed something unsettling. His phone buzzed again, and the same notification appeared. "The aisle is waiting, Kenny." After that night, Kenny never went back to the store. The town seemed normal enough, but every time he walked past the Amazon Go, he couldn't shake the feeling that something inside was always watching, waiting for him to come back. And the whispers, they never quite stopped following him. Sometimes late at night, he'd hear them again, soft, hushed, but unmistakably there.
Story number 4.
The Amazon Go store in a small, secluded town nestled in the mountains was unlike any other. People rarely came here, but those who did were often locals, and they all swore by it. The store was only a few years old, built in the quiet valley where not much else existed, and it promised convenience. Walk in, pick your items, and walk out without ever needing to speak to a soul. It had a strange charm, with its clean, sleek design and its promise of total automation. Ellen had been traveling through the area on a road trip, needing to pick up some basic supplies. When she noticed the store, she figured it would be a quick stop. It was late, well past midnight, and she was the only car in the parking lot. She hesitated for a moment before walking through the automatic sliding doors, hearing them softly whoosh open. The inside of the store was eerily quiet. The usual hum of music or background noise was completely absent. The aisles stretched on longer than they should have, casting long shadows in the fluorescent light. Ellen glanced at the shelves, well stocked as always, but something felt wrong. The air was too still, too perfect. She grabbed a bottle of water, then another snack, and moved toward the back of the store. The only sound was the gentle click of the store's automated system registering her purchases as she picked up each item. But then, as she walked deeper into the store, she noticed a strange noise, a low, almost imperceptible murmur. It wasn't coming from the intercom system. No, this was coming from the aisles. She turned, trying to track the source. It was too quiet, and the murmur sounded so faint that at first she thought it was her imagination. But no, it was unmistakable now. It wasn't a hum or a buzz. It was voices, low, indistinct voices whispering, calling her name. Ellen, her skin prickled. She froze, a cold sweat creeping down her back. She was alone in the store. No one else was there, yet the voices continued. Ellen, please come closer. Panic crept in as she glanced toward the aisles. There, at the end of one of them, she thought she saw something. A shape, a person? But it was moving strangely, almost like it was drifting, gliding across the floor without touching it. It didn't make sense. She blinked and the shape was gone. Her heartbeat quickened. She turned toward the exit, ready to leave. But as she stepped forward, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then they went out completely. The store plunged into an oppressive darkness, the kind that felt thick and heavy. Ellen whipped out her phone, the only light she had now, but it flickered and died almost instantly, its battery completely drained despite being nearly full when she entered. In the pitch black, the whispering voices grew louder, circling around her. Ellen, you shouldn't have come here. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she tried to steady her breathing, her heart thudding in her chest. She took a step back. The cold air in the store now seemed unnaturally frigid. Then she saw it. From the corner of her eye, something moved, slowly. It was a person again, a tall, shadowy figure, but its proportions were wrong. It seemed stretched, distorted, like a twisted version of a human being. The figure lurched toward her, dragging its limbs across the floor at an odd, jerking pace. Ellen spun on her heel and ran, her footfalls echoing in the empty store. She reached the door and grabbed at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panicked, she tugged harder, but the door was sealed tight. The air around her grew heavier, the whispers louder, the figure getting closer. It was almost right behind her now, but every time she turned, it was gone, vanishing into the darkness, only to reappear again. Creeping closer, she hit the emergency exit button. Nothing. She slammed her fists against the glass doors. The figure was right there. It was watching her, its face finally visible. It was a face that wasn't a face at all, just a blank, smooth surface like polished marble with empty eyes. The whispers turned to screams now, piercing and shrill. You can't leave. You won't leave. With a desperate cry, she backed away, stumbling over a shelf. The whispers turned into an unbearable roar. Then, just as quickly as it had begun, the store went completely silent. Ellen stood, frozen in the middle of the dark store. The lights flickered back on, and everything seemed normal again. The shelves were just as they had been. The air, however, still felt thick. She glanced at the door again. This time it opened on its own. She didn't hesitate. She bolted out, stumbling into the parking lot, gasping for air. The figure, the voices, it was all gone. She didn't know if she was imagining it all, or if something more sinister was at play. But she didn't stick around to find out. Ellen never spoke of what happened that night to anyone. But as she drove away, she couldn't shake the feeling that the Amazon Go store was still watching her from behind, waiting for the next person to wander in. And next time, maybe they wouldn't leave at all.